In 1855, something that the townspeople saw when they stepped outside one morning to handle their daily chores terrified everyone. The locals were so horrified that the words "the devil has come out of hell" began to spread. This event, a mystery unsolved for 168 years, remains a secret to this day. Here is the story of the unknown entity that moved straight through the snow without stopping, passing even over the roofs of houses. It was one of the coldest winters ever seen in England. The date was February 1855. Temperatures had dropped to -5 degrees and continued that way for 3 months. During this period, severe snowstorms occurred. On February 8, 1855, the people living in a typical town in the Devon region of England had spent another stormy night and woken up to a freezing morning. However, when they left their homes, they realized that day was anything but ordinary. What they saw was very strange and frightening, because before them were strange footprints that stretched from one end of the village to the other. They took tools like scythes and axes and went to the town center. At that moment, a loud noise was heard throughout the town. Everyone was confused and in a panic. They wanted to understand what was happening and find a solution. A police officer, upon hearing the noise, immediately went to the town center. When the officer arrived, everyone was in a state of alarm, and he didn't understand why they were so agitated. This was because at first glance, the footprints looked like the ordinary tracks of a hoofed animal. In their fear, the townspeople told the officer to go to where the tracks were. Upon following the tracks, he understood why the townspeople were scared. The footprints he followed continued in a straight line without stopping, even when they encountered an obstacle. When the tracks approached the wall of a building, they continued uninterrupted from the other side of the building. Incredibly, the footprints had also passed through the building. The officer asked those nearby for a ladder and began to climb onto the roof of the single-story house. When he got to the roof, he saw something that frightened him. When he came down, the assembled crowd saw that the police officer looked as if he had seen a ghost. After a moment of silence, the officer turned to the crowd and explained that the footprints continued across the roof of the house and that whatever had caused them had walked over most things in its path, from market stalls to freight wagons. Hearing this, the townspeople fell into a long silence, unable to comprehend what had happened. It seemed that something supernatural had wandered through the town that night, leaving these tracks behind. The first few months of 1855 were so cold that the roads were closed. People couldn't even step out of their homes. By February 9, strange reports started coming into the police station. Unexplained events were occurring in the towns of the Devon region. This time, another case of mysterious footprints was reported from a different area. Teams immediately began to investigate. According to initial findings, the tracks were spread over an area covering 160 kilometers, which was a vast expanse. The tracks passed through 30 different locations and were about 6 centimeters in size. They also resembled hooves, but not like those of horses or other animals. This thing had 2 feet and there was a 20 centimeters gap between each footprint. The distance between the 2 feet was about 15 centimeters. Another unknown aspect of these tracks was the way this thing walked. The owner of the footprints had even walked on the roofs of houses, barns, and structures of various sizes. Nothing seemed to impede its progress. This was particularly strange because if you imagine experiencing this, there was something that left only footprints, was never seen and never caught your eye. The police officers stated that this was the first time they had ever encountered such an incident. It was also quite interesting that something could spread over kilometers without causing any damage. In fact, if there was a being called a devil, as the townspeople claimed in this event known as the Devil's Footprints, its sole purpose would have been to harm the townspeople and the environment. But we see that there was no harm to either the people or the surroundings. There were only footprints that spread over a large area and moved forward without being stopped by anything. The police tried to take statements from witnesses in the area, however many problems hindered these efforts. For example, the investigation could not proceed due to the melting snow. On the other hand, the people who witnessed this event were terrified. The people affected by this incident had only one explanation: the devil had come out of hell and was wandering around while people slept. This explanation, which sounds quite comical at first, actually stemmed from people's fear of this thing for them. Experiencing such an event and offering such an explanation was the most fitting response. The people of Devon who said the devil had left a permanent mark on the snow also claimed that this was not Lucifer's first visit to Devon. These stories dated back about 400 years. On a cold Sunday morning in October 1638, a sermon was being given at St. Pancras Church. The congregation sat quietly and listened. While everything was normal, the church suddenly filled with the smell of burning. Something broke through the church roof with a loud crash and fell inside. More frightening than the falling debris was something else. In the middle of the church was a mysterious ball of blindingly bright light. This ball moved quickly among the crowd. It threw an old woman to the ground with great force. It was later understood that the ball of light had burned the spot where it struck the woman. Additionally, 2 men in the church were fatally injured in this manner. But there was something even more interesting. The congregation realized that a child was missing. From among them, the child was searched for days but was never found. The congregation attributed the child's disappearance to the devil. After the second footprint incident, many hypotheses were formulated. A logical explanation was sought for this event, dubbed the devil's footprints, but none were sufficient to explain it logically. The most popular hypothesis was again that it was an animal's track. Although the local people thought the event was the work of the devil, many people's opinions did not align. For instance, ideas that it could be animals like rats, badgers or kangaroos emerged, but this case has remained unsolved for 168 years. While it may seem absurd to many, it was quite terrifying for those who experienced it. What could this incident be which even the police team investigated without making any sense of it? Another rumor suggests that this event was a military experiment and that what happened has been covered up ever since. Were these tracks truly belonging to a devil as people exaggerated, or was it all just a conspiracy? The claim that it belonged to a devil was seen as absurd by everyone. This event, which some people viewed as a conspiracy, was too strange to be called one. If these tracks belonged to an animal, they would surely have been caught on some visible detail. Although the possibility of these tracks spreading over a 160-kilometer area belonging to an animal is slim, it is still possible. To this day, the truth of this event has not been solved. The 168-year-old unsolved mystery has been etched in minds as the devil's footprints.